Welcome back. We have most of our participants back with us, and we can start with the afternoon session. You have heard this morning about how the policy framework was benchmarked for the innovation procurement, and this afternoon session is actually envisaged to explain to you what kind of methodology was used to evaluate the investments on innovation procurement and to respond to the question how anchoring innovation procurement in horizontal policy actually reflects on the real investments in the country. So we will share again our presentation, and at the very beginning we will remind you once more of the possibility to use the Menti tool. As a form of a warm-up, I will invite you again to scan the QR code you see on your right hand of the slide. This is a new QR code, and the new code, if you are using the access through the web page. So we'll do the same exercise once more because we will have a few more questions for you in this second part of our presentation. So I only have 4 thumbs up so far, but I hope that this doesn't mean that only 4 of you have joined Menti. So for all of you, we can perhaps return once more, just provide some more time for you to either scan the QR code or go to the web page using this code. And okay, I see some more thumbs up. And we can proceed to the first question, which will open our afternoon session. And this is actually to check whether you know how your country scored on the total investments in innovation in the previous benchmarking study. So what was the score your country was awarded in terms of percentages? Was it like 10% of total public procurement is being invested on innovation, or was it in the neighborhood of 2% or perhaps 30%? Give your closest estimate if you remember reading the first benchmarking study, if you perhaps have enough knowledge to provide some kind of an estimate. Please share with us how you think you scored. Mm-hmm.
We also provided a little bit of help in the form of a link during the break. So maybe some of you have had a chance to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, we had some lucky guesses, but most of you are not actually aware of how your country ranked in the previous benchmarking study. But that's why we have this afternoon session where Jelena will introduce you to the methodology for the investment benchmarking, but also present you with the final results of the investment benchmarking. So now I'm passing the floor to my colleague Jelena to guide you through this second part of our presentation.
Thank you, Marina. Hope you had a nice break, and now I will go to the second part, which is, as Marina mentioned, related to the investment benchmarking. This was part of the project, I would say, which was quite challenging, and the most challenging aspect of this part of the project was data. And I will, during the day, so now when presenting the methodology and when presenting the results, I will actually maybe more a few times tell you about what were the challenges related to data and actually what could be the challenges also related to this aspect in the for the future benchmarkings. We can move forward.
Just to check with the participants if they're all okay hearing us. Some of our comments are asking.
Is everything okay? Can someone confirm whether you can hear us well? And apologies for this. Yes, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yes, great. This is also to see whether you're listening or not. Good. So yes, let's then start with data gathering, and this was actually the first step we started. So our project started basically beginning of 2023, and we immediately started with the planning and gathering of the data from public and private data providers, and preparing the questionnaire and interviews for gathering data for defense. One important note is that we won't be presenting the data on defense today, but it will be available as part of the final study and final results. So all the data and information presented today is non-related to defense. So just keep that in mind while elaborating and listening to the results. So as mentioned, data gathering started in the beginning of 2023. We were building upon actually the experiences from the first, actually the previous benchmarking study that was done for the year 2018. And let's say use some lessons learned also related to data gathering and data providers. I will tell you a little bit more about this in the next slides. But when we managed to gather the data, and this period actually was not only the data gathering started last year, but I would say it ended this year. The reason why is because the quality of data was quite different, and we needed to get additional data or additional data fields also later in the stage. When we gather all the data, we started processing this data. And the data processing itself has a few aspects. One of them is related to the AI tool. You can see it on the slide, but below. And the AI tool is actually built from the scratch, let's put it like that. But my colleague Anton will tell you a little bit later on more about this process and also show how the AI works. I know that some of you are excited about that because we got a lot of questions on the AI. But we actually started already from the very beginning working in parallel with all these processes, working on the AI tool to be able to process all the data. And as a third step, to identify innovation procurements. And the last part was actually the calculations. But before that, apart from the AI, there was quite a lot of manual work also. Again, primarily because of the quality of data. And of course, because AI has its own, AI had a part related to the training, which will be actually explained a little bit later on, where you need to do manual checks and confirmations. So after that, we calculated the amount of innovation procurement, and for today, we prepared ranking and some also more detailed information and data on different segments of innovation procurement. And what is still left, and this is something that will be available also to you, is the preparation and elaboration of country profiles for each of the 30 countries concerned. We can move to the next slide and start actually with, sorry, we have one question again for you before we go. What do you think, how many procurement cases or procurement procedures we have collected and analyzed for the year 2022? So basically the question is, how many procurement procedures were there in 2022? This might be a trick question. I will tell you later on a little bit more. Okay. There are different numbers. I'm not sure. Thousands would be is the closest one until now. Okay, we have one hand raised. If there are any questions, I think it would be great if you could put it in the chat. Otherwise, we will also have a Q&A part later in the afternoon. Okay, good. Okay, let's move forward. Okay, so what it might be very interesting for you is that we had more than 3 million tenders in the database. In the end, we managed to analyze, basically we analyzed all of them, but one of the key input which might be very important and interesting for you is that within those data sets, there was a lot of data also related to private companies and so on. And this sometimes happens because they use also public, they use either web pages or public procurement platforms to ask for some works, supplies, or services. So we needed to clean that data from, obviously, from private providers, but also some additional. What we used and how we actually started our journey is by contacting data providers. And we used both private and public data providers to analyze, to gather the data and then analyze it. You can see on this slide for each country who was the data providers. So most of the data providers were, apart from TED, obviously, which we used to get the above threshold data sets. For all the countries, we also used national data providers to gather tenders below thresholds. So you can see the ones that have the dollar sign, they're actually the ones that are private data providers. And for many countries, we actually use those because they usually have better quality of data, or public data providers were not able to provide us with data for the country concerned. So we can move forward. What did we gather? We actually started gathering, these are the data fields that we were looking into, and those are the data fields that we used in our analysis within the AI, but also for the further analysis and elaboration that will be part of the country profiles you will see later on, and to analyze, for example, how much procurement is, innovation procurement is there in, for example, one of the public sector's domains, such as energy or environment. But also, it was very important to have a large amount of data fields involved, because the data is not complete. So none of the countries has complete data. So we didn't get any, I would say, perfect data set from any of the country which would contain all this information. So we needed some of the data to be able to estimate the one that is missing, or to do it at the level, of the countries, or to do it on the level of all the countries concerned. Okay, yes, again, I see for a few times just the questions related to sharing the information. Yes, we will be sharing. This is why we are recording the session, and we will also share the presentation. And further on, the European Commission will be actually providing you with country profiles on the web pages we shared with you. So just as an information, yes, you will have all the data later on. Okay, so we can move to the next slide. One very important thing actually to mention is that we were trying to gather contract notices, because this was also part of the previous methodology, and to make these data sets as comparable as possible with the previous study from previous year that was benchmarked, which is 2018. However, for some of the countries, we couldn't actually get the data sets with contract notices, or they were really of a poor quality. So we also use contract award notices, where contract notices were not of this high quality. So we have kind of a mixture of that. Here are just some facts and figures we collected. So in terms of the amount in terms of the data sets, 14% of the tenders are from TED, and most of the tenders, so most of the procurement in terms of numbers, is actually happening at the levels of member states and the UK, Norway, and Switzerland at the national level. And this is why this data was so important, and the quality of this data was so important for us. So you can see also some additional data, which might be also kind of a fun fact, I would say. When it comes to this project, we use 19 different data sets, where 13 were provided by national public authorities, 6 from the private service providers, but private service providers covered, we had one private service provider which covered many countries. So this is also something maybe to mention. And then there was significant effort actually in terms of data cleaning and standardization of the data, because we needed to do a lot of manual checks. There was a team actually of experts working only on that part of the project. As mentioned, there were many calls for tender that we used, many procurement documentations. We evaluated basically 3.5 million tenders. We went through those data sets either manually or through AI, or we needed to clean them from already mentioned private providers, but also some additional information, some additional data which was not needed, then additional procurement procedures. We also, and Anton will tell you a little bit more about that. So when training the AI, we were using also tender documents, not only those data sets, but also tender documents, and there was a lot of actually manual check on that part as well. Again, as I mentioned, as the quality of data is not at the level which would be satisfactory for all countries, there was a considerable amount of time that was needed to actually fill out the data, the metadata gaps. Maybe to mention that one of the challenges we had is also that, for example, some very significant metadata was missing, such as CPV codes, which are then the basis for estimation of certain values. So there was a lot of thinking and a lot of, I would say, work on the approaches, how to estimate some of the values. And we can move forward. Yes, as mentioned, data processing, which is the second part, was focused on the data identification and availability. So we actually calculated when we have this data, what is the percentage of the available data for each of the countries. So you can actually see what's the quality of the data sets for each country. And then based on that, we did the data enrichments and estimations. So enriching the missing values, which were for some countries done at a more larger scale, for some at a lower scale, and then calculate the missing values, such as estimated values of procurement, which are quite often missing, or they are not correct. For example, if a public entity, so public procurer who publishes tender documents, for example, this provides an information that the estimation is 0 or some big number which is not realistic, then we needed to actually calculate and calculate and estimate those numbers. And let's say the final part was also related to the streamlining of the data. We needed to, let's say, clean the data from duplicates because it sometimes happened that there are double tenders in TED and non-TED datasets because they are published on both pages. And then we also converted all the currency values to euro, so it's comparable. We can move forward. So how did the data processing and the estimation of the missing contract values look like? This is very important because in our data sets, as mentioned, we needed to estimate quite a number of data, and this is the most important, I would say, because with the estimation of the values, we're then using these values to decide and to calculate how much innovation procurement is actually happening in each of the countries. So we were using clusters based on the countries and the contract size, whether they're above or below the thresholds. And we used CPV codes as a basis to actually estimate those missing contract values. We removed the outliers from the clusters, so you can see how on this slide how we approached this, because some of the tenders were actually removed from the thresholds, and values which are above 100 million were actually manually checked. So all the tenders above 100 million euros were manually checked, and their values were either checked on the TED web pages, or we were contacting directly contracting authorities to see what are these realistic numbers in the end, and what were the contract values, because usually these contracts can make huge difference in terms of the final data when calculating. Same goes for the framework contracts, which we then we use the value only for the first four years. Otherwise, also it would make, for some countries, for example, UK had one very big framework contract for, I think it was around 10 years. So it would make a really huge difference if we took that into consideration only as it is. Then the prices were adjusted based on the purchase power parity, and this is something that was also something that was taken from the methodology from the previous benchmarking study, and you'll be also able to see how this was calculated. But the idea is actually that we cluster and take into consideration the countries that are of a similar GDP and a similar, let's say, development stage. And then we summarize the values for the countries with adjusted prices and calculated median for each cluster to be used for the estimation of the missing values. We can move forward. What was benchmarked? So we were benchmarking actually innovation procurement investments, so the PPIs, and you can see that we calculated, and the results will be shown. So in a way that you can see the number of transformative and incremental innovations. We were also identifying different domains of public sector activity, and later on you will see in the results how it looks like. We also calculated the explicit and implicit innovation procurement, published and unpublished, because there is a lot of tender. There's a lot of procurement that is not actually published, and some in large amount of cases this is actually connected to innovation. And then across different levels of public sector activity, such as whether this is a local, regional, or national public procurement, or public authority which is performing this procurement. We were also going into the R&D procurement investment, and we benchmarked the procurement investments dedicated to the ICT-based solutions. Why ICT? ICT is obviously one of the drivers of innovation, and I think that's something that's very important to mention here. PPI was selected using the AI, whereas R&D and ICTs were actually checked according to the CPV codes, And then, because CPV codes are not always reliable source of information, and I think that most of you are quite aware of that, we also use manual verification of those tenders, because there are a lot of ICT tenders which are, for example, not marked with CPV code that would be related to ICT, rather something else. So we need to do that as well. So yeah, following the information about the ICT, how did we do it? We actually used, as you can see, more than 1,000 different CPV codes, and we clustered ICTs into the 3 categories. So core ICT, content and media, and ICT plus. So you will see later on also what are the results. For the ICT, core ICTs, basically those are the ICT products that are intended to fulfill or enable information processing and communication by electronic means, including transmission and display. Content and media are those that are printed and audiovisual messages published in communication media with value in their information, educational, or entertainment content. And then we have an ICT plus. These are products with embedded ICT equipment. You can probably guess what is the most common one, obviously also the one that has the biggest number also of CPV codes, but we'll come to that later on with the results. We can move forward. So finally, before I leave the floor to AI part and my colleague Anton, just to wrap up that I think that the biggest challenge, which will still remain for the future and future benchmarking, is for sure the data challenge. So data coverage, first of all, because not all the countries are actually providing, not all the countries have data sets ready for the whole year, sometimes in cases, I would say on the top of my head now it's France and Denmark. And sometimes it actually happened because of the changes of the platforms. Some of the data sets or the tenders were not available at all. For example, in Denmark, we realized that the tenders which are published, and at the moment that they are awarded, they're being deleted, so they're not more or less always there already. So you need to collect basically in the real time those tenders to be able to analyze them. So there are many different examples, but this is just one of them. And then that's why we also had this extensive manual work on data to fill in these gaps. So this is something also to take into consideration, and also for the future AI work, I would say. And also there is a different level of the quality, different level of availability of this data among the countries. And very important thing is that some countries also have these flagging systems, or they haven't, or even developing AIs to show and to somehow flag the innovation procurement. But then we still see that there are different understandings of what PPI is, what innovation procurement is, especially among the public, especially among the public procurement specialists who are actually working with public procurement and publishing those. So yes, this is all from my side. I see you have a lot of questions, but we'll come to that back. I'll go through them during the presentation of Anton, and we'll get back to you with answers. Thank you very much.
Yes, hi. So now we're coming to the development of the AI tool and how we used it. Now, a few questions maybe before we actually start. We could use Menti again. Maybe just if you could provide us some of your thoughts. Actually, if you have used ChatGPT or similar products that are publicly available, did you have any experience with data privacy issues, or maybe some actually hallucinations and such stuff? Okay. Answers here actually. Maybe we wait a few more answers. So maybe before we actually continue, so just a few points here, and you will be able maybe to answer then. If you have used ChatGPT or something similar, or Edge Copilot, you would actually maybe notice that it gives wrong answers, completely wrong facts that, I mean, it's not even a fact in that case, it's actually a lie, where ChatGPT would construct the entire answer in such a way that you would think that it's a real fact. It could construct maybe even a link or a document reference where you would think that this is something really available on the internet, and it would be actually completely wrong. It would just think this. It would just come up with this fake links and such stuff. Those are called hallucinations. Now, in terms of data privacy, when you actually when you chat with ChatGPT or Gemini or any of those kinds of publicly available tools, there is a chance that if you write some private information into your prompt, that's how we call this small input field, that it could come out somewhere else. Somebody else could see it. It's like, you know, providing your private information directly into the public data space. It's not always like that, but at least at the very beginning, this was one of the major issues. So maybe in an answer you saw something in a ChatGPT answer, something that's actually kind of worrying in the sense that this could be some private data from somebody else. But let's move on. Let's continue. Maybe another question to you. So you can come up with your own answers. So each AI model has its own accuracy. This one was our AI model was supposed to label whether procurements are innovative or not. And in that sense, if you actually if you think that something is highly related to the accuracy that the model will actually correctly label something, what do you think it could be? What would be the main factors influencing its accuracy? So let's see if you can come up with some thoughts, some answers. What could it be? Interesting. Okay, we'll actually wait maybe for a few more answers. Yeah. And these many are actually quite correct now. We can see those. And at the last slide of this part, we will of the session, we will actually provide you a direct answer what was going on, what was influencing mostly the performance of the AI tool. Now, maybe let's move on. So at the one more thing before we actually dive into some details, just so you understand the surrounding of this AI tool in time and AI space, AI landscape. Just at the beginning of the project, maybe a few weeks before ChatGPT was published. So actually, just with the beginning of the project, the entire understanding of what AI tools should do and could do on the market shifted a lot, and people actually got quite influenced, and expectations rose. And maybe you wonder whether we used ChatGPT or something similar like that, those large language models. Yes, we actually did so, but the main star of this AI part of the project wasn't the ChatGPT. It was actually a much simpler AI tool, an explainable AI tool. We actually, since the very beginning, worked according to the new EU AI Act. Now, it got published actually just not that far ago, a few months ago, but for almost a year before it got published, we already were working based on the EU AI Act. And we included all of these very important guidelines into the development of the AI tool. So basically, for example, it was crucial for us that the AI is trustworthy. In fact, we went so far that we used explainable AI models so that we could always verify what were the reasons why the AI actually provided certain answers and labels. So in that sense, we knew that we will have a data mining approach for the tender analysis. We knew that it's not going to be just machine learning, that we had to implement a lot of statistical research, and that we needed a lot of database systems and querying approach. Now, of course, this was all needed to extract the information from the data set for further use by the team. So once we created a list of potential innovation procurements, that was not the end. Actually, that was a start for further analysis that Jelena will later tell you about. Now, during the development of the AI tool, we use both unsupervised and supervised machine learning algorithms that were actually provided by the open source community. So, and we will also open source our code. So actually everybody can verify what we did, how we did it. And you can also use it for your own purposes. You could maybe investigate your own data and basically modify the tool for some other purposes or something else. Now, quite important for us was the creation of the training data sets, obviously. I mean, we had to analyze almost 3 million tenders with this tool. And the training data set had to be quite big. It was quite obvious that we will have some hard time to do it completely manually. So we wanted to use some other AI tools that would help the human supervisors to create this training data set. And especially important for us was the creation of the initial training data set. And for that purpose, we actually used tenders that had some documentation, for the simple reason that the human supervisors, the human trainers, could actually analyze the tender and verify whether something is innovation procurement or not. Now, we couldn't use the documentation for all tenders simply because a huge part of all the tenders did not have any documentation. In some countries, none of the tenders had tender documents available, and there we had some trouble actually how to fix the missing information and so on, what to do next. So you will see during the demo of the tool, so we will show you the tool itself. We actually made it as a web application, and this allowed us actually to use some other AI tools that were not part of our own development, but were built into, for example, browsers. So many standard browsers have, among others, translation tools, so you could actually right-click on a field or on a part of the web page, or even for the entire page, you could ask the web browser to translate it. Now, well, we'll show you that. So we had actually, during that stage of the creation of the initial training data set, we went through some 36,000 tenders, each with its own documents. Now, even if each tender had a single page of documentation, it would be quite a lot. And there are some tenders that even had hundreds of documents, and those had to be analyzed in an, let's say, inexpensive way. And we were not finished after the initial training. That was just the start. Then we could actually continue with the actual training, where we would actually develop AI models that were able to analyze only the descriptive metadata, such as tender titles and tender descriptions or additional information and so on, to actually estimate whether something is innovation procurement or not. And there we actually got up to some 80,000 tenders that were all manually checked and verified only for the training. And we did a lot of querying. We did actually a lot of manual stuff just to make sure that the AI can learn something. And we also had to analyze how it performs. And for that reason, we did a tenfold cross-validation to estimate the accuracy of each country model. And okay, it sounds fancy, but tenfold cross-validation means actually that you split the entire training data set into 10 parts. And in each iteration, you omit one of the 10 parts and leave use the rest, the 9 other parts, to actually train the AI. And in that case, you are actually able to estimate how it performs if some information is missing, how well it generalizes. Let's move on to the next slide. And before we show you the tool itself, just a short explanation of how it works. So, okay, of course, the tool itself, you will see it has the part where the human supervisor can actually check what's being analyzed. It's human readable text, but the machines cannot process it directly. We actually had to use machine processable definition, and we used word embeddings to do so, to translate the human readable text into machine processable text. And after that, we had actually 2 stages of machine learning. So the tool would actually use a quite well-known and well-defined explainable methodology, which is called term frequency inverse document frequency, a technique that is being used only for analyzing what are the keywords in the data set. So what are the most important words for each tender that's being analyzed? Like humans would actually look for certain keywords to find out whether something is innovation procurement or not. And after that, we had the very simple and most explainable and quite normal used logistic regression that's widely used and well defined, and it would actually provide the weights of each of the keywords. So in other words, in essence, we would actually have the AI tool would weigh how many positive keywords against how many negative keywords there are in a tender. And if the positive keywords would outweigh the negative keywords, we would say that we have identified an innovation procurement. The other way around, if the negative keywords outweigh the positive keywords, then we know that we actually identified a non-innovation procurement. So maybe just we show you how it looked. Just let me I'll share soon the screen. So let's give it a try. Okay, I hope you can see actually.
Okay.
Okay. So, well, you would actually, this would be the home screen. It's a very simple tool. Well, it was most important for us to actually make it as powerful as possible. Now, for all the audience, we will actually try to find a country that uses typically tenders in English language. So let's find something. I don't know, this one. And this is typically what you would see when, as a human supervisors, trying to understand what's going on. So I'm not sure, maybe it's too small. I will maybe zoom in a little bit. But on the left side, you have the text being analyzed, and this is actually this is the type of text we would see during the initial training, during the creation of the initial training set, where you have the entire document. And it could be, you can see it's quite long. Sometimes it would be very long. It would even take a lot of time to load all the text. And on the left side, you had this general the entire tender documentation. On the right side, you would, if it was already trained, you would see which of the words were very important. And here you can actually see that, for example, here, obviously, it's about electrical mobility, because we have some words that were quite important, like electric, van, wheelchair, and so on. Well, so this is actually, this is probably an innovation procurement simply because of electrical mobility. Now, when we actually, when we did the analysis of the entire, of all the tenders, all the 2.9 million tenders, we were not able to use the tender documentation, so we actually had to analyze just the tender title and tender description. So you can see obviously that there is much less information, and in this case it was innovation procurement because it was something related to superconductors and so on. So basically, we actually wanted to always to verify what were the keywords that we were supposed to look for. Now, luckily, it was not just us telling the AI what are the keywords. We would manually search for the keywords during the process of labeling, but we could also check out what the AI tool learned as important keywords. So, like in this case, in the UK, obviously, drones and virtual reality, DNA, LiDAR, and digital prototypes were quite common keywords that we would find actually during the analysis. And this of course helped us a lot. Now on the other side, we had negative keywords, and we actually also would, when we wanted to do some quality assessment, how well everything performs, and also supervise our own supervisors, we would actually check also the negative keywords. And okay, obviously the AI tool learned that, for example, consultative services are quite common and usually related to something that's not necessarily innovative. And but there were also some other, like electrical works and rooms being built and so on, words typically related to something, to some classic industries. Okay, well, if you wanted to use during the analysis some additional tools, then it was made possible simply by the browser itself. Well, here I'm using the okay, the Edge browser. You would have the same in the Chrome browser, or if you're using any extensions in other browsers, and you have like these parts where you can actually translate to English something. Okay, our team had different people speaking all the languages across all the countries. We used people from all the different countries that maybe they were not always native speakers, but they did speak all these languages. But anyway, if they actually wanted to understand what's going on and just use a translation just to make sure that they understand everything, they could translate it to English. On the other hand, you had, I don't know if you actually had the opportunity to use some of the new virtual assistants. So this is from the Microsoft product family, but doesn't matter. Other manufacturers, software manufacturers, do quite the same. If you were lucky, you could actually just type in over here into the virtual assistant something like analyze this page, and then ask it, can you find something like, can you find any descriptions of innovative technologies? And if this was such a case, sorry, usually it was not, but if this was such a case that you had, for example, something like disruptive innovation, then the large language model would actually know about it immediately, and maybe it would actually say something about it. Well, this actually is just talking about that we already identified something like innovation procurement. But what we find here, so actually it didn't find a lot. It didn't understand the content of this web page completely. So in this case, we were not that lucky. Okay, well, of course, if you have any questions on how we actually annotated, how we train the model and so on, you can ask it. We can show it. We can actually provide even a demo or something like that. Well, let's maybe move on to the next slide and maybe a next question, and just okay, if Marina could share the screen again, or no?
Yes.
Mattea. Yeah. Okay, a simple question. Would you use this type of tool to investigate your own data? Okay, still rising. So probably we'll get some further answers, but obviously most of the audience would use it. Now let's move on to the next slide. We want to actually provide some feedback on some important findings about the data and the model performance. Now, obviously, not every country model performed equally well. The amount of innovation procurement in the data set itself.
Just a second. Okay, yeah, it's fine.
So just to clarify it, so if you have very little innovation procurement in the entire data set, something like 2%, then it means that 98% of the time, if the AI would simply guess that, always guess that there is no innovation procurement there, it would actually be right for 98% of the time. And so it would be hard for it to make a mistake simply by guessing that there is no innovation procurement at all. So in those cases, if we wanted to teach the AI that there is innovation procurement, we actually had to force it to assume more often that something might be innovation procurement, even if it's not. So we had some false positives. And only when we saw that there is a lot of false positives, we knew that the AI model started to learn. And then we could actually work on reduction of the false positives. So until we actually, so at some point we couldn't continue because we simply ran out of time. But the final session of training actually proved, and we actually always monitor the performance of the models, proved that in general, 1 out of 3 PPIs could be a false positive. So and then the team had to, in the next part of the project, had to actually manually verify all of those potential PPIs. And something that might be more interesting to you is probably the fact that quite a considerable factor was the availability of documentation. Now, availability of documentation, there is a simple explanation where actually the human supervisors, the human trainers, were able to provide a much better training data set if they had tender documentation available. On the other hand, we also found that when tender documentation was missing, this is not the case for all countries, but we found that sometimes, not sometimes, quite often, when the tender documentation was missing, then inside these descriptive metadata, these tender descriptions, the procurers would actually put a lot of text about how to get additional information, such as, where to whom to reach out, what are the email addresses that you can actually, where you can write emails to those people that can provide you with additional information and the documentation and everything needed for the tender. And now, of course, if there is a lot of text that's not describing the subject itself, but it's describing how to get additional information, whether those are information about the links or email address or anything else, web pages, you would actually have a lot of noise, and it would be hard for any AI to, and even for humans, to identify the keywords that were related to the subject itself, where you would be able actually to, understand whether it's innovation procurement or not. And there was a lot of additional other manual work, and Jelena will actually now further probably explain to you how much more work they had to do. Now, we could maybe have some questions and answers just before that.
Yeah. So we have some questions, first of all, from Mr. Igor Patelli, who is trying to understand an example that you have shown, where the keywords were electric, wheelchair, police, and so on. But to understand how the system works and probably what the system then does with those keywords.
Okay, understood. So basically, what the AI would do there, so it found while learning what are typical keywords related to the innovation procurement in a certain country. In this case, it was Malta. It actually found out the AI would learn that that certain keywords related to electric e-mobility are very important. Those would be electric. Electric on its own is not that important. It could be also something related to electrical works. But when combined with some vehicles, and there it was actually the van was the main vehicle in this example, then actually electric van is something related to e-mobility. So van itself, no. Electric, no. But electric van, this is something related to the e-mobility. So it was able to actually identify that this tender is quite has a high probability that it could be potentially an innovation procurement. So it would label it as potential innovation procurement, and then the human supervisors could actually label it, whether it's correctly labeled or not. On the other hand, if we actually were looking for something else that's non-innovation, we would see a lot of negative keywords. I hope this actually clarifies. Did you also identify any false negatives? Yes, of course, we had false negatives where the AI was not able to learn that something is actually innovation procurement. Just maybe a short clarification. So this is an explainable model. It uses logistic regression. For this type of model, it's simple enough that in some cases it could maybe never, it couldn't learn for certain cases that those are innovation or non-innovation procurement, simply because it's not that flexible. Larger models are usually much more flexible, and then it shouldn't be the case. But if you want to have high explainability, then you have to allow that some mistakes are made by the AI. Are there any other questions, maybe?
It seems there are none. Of course you can. Okay, there is one. Okay. Okay, this is something that is maybe for a round of Q&As. Since we will have many different questions, so we will get back to you. We are following all the questions, so we will answer because we will have a Q&A session once we finalize the overall presentation. But also, and now we will go into the results of the benchmarking of national investments on innovation procurement, excluding defense. And do you want me to share it or? This one. Okay. Okay, let me then just share it from the beginning, so it will be, I think, easier. There will be, I can see some more questions related to the AI, but we will answer them later on. Sorry. I have to share my screen. I hope you can see it. Okay, good. Then what we have here on this slide is, again, we mentioned this quite a lot of time. Obviously, I think we're in a good position now to use AI to detect innovation procurement. However, we still have to leverage human work here, and there was a lot of, again, human verification of the tenders. Here also, again, some of the data related to it, and maybe just to mention that there has been, in the end, when we finalized the work that Anton now presented with the AI, we actually, and cleaning the data sets afterwards, we actually ended up having more than 40,000 confirmed PPIs, which is, in terms of the number, much higher than it was when the previous benchmarking was done. But what we can see now, that there are also, apart from the higher number of tenders, is that there are more of those which are smaller in amount, which would mean that more public procurers are actually buying innovation. Okay, let me move forward just a moment. What did we actually, and how did we analyze it? How did we calculate it, and what will you be able to find as a result? So, apart from the tenders that were part of the data set, so the ones that are published on TED web pages and national public procurement platforms, which we called published explicit innovation procurements, because those are the ones which actually also take place when a public procurer explicitly requests innovation solution. We know about it, it's published and so on. But then again, we were estimating the value of unpublished explicit innovation procurements, which are the ones that are explicitly requested. So where the innovation or innovative solution is explicitly requested by public procurer, but it was not published in the data sources collected by us. So it was not published on TED or on the national platform. There was actually a question in the chat regarding this. How did we work with any of the unpublished tenders? No, we actually just estimate according to certain studies. We actually estimate the number of the unpublished explicit innovation procurement. In addition, there is also there are also implicit innovation procurement, which are actually the ones which are not explicitly requested by the public procurer. So the tender is not prepared in a way that the public procurement entity is asking for innovation, but it has been proposed by the tenderer. So those are, let's say, the three components of PPI which we were using, which we're analyzing, and which are actually calculated in the final amount of the PPI. So these are, in the end, they are part of the percentages you will see now. And here they are. Here are the results of the investment benchmarking for the EU27 Norway, UK, and Switzerland. You can see that there are actually a number of countries which we would call strong performers. The average PPI average grew a little bit from the previous benchmarking, so it's above 10%, and in the previous benchmarking it was below 10%. So we are growing slowly, but we are. And then we have countries which are moving into the category of strong performers. Of course, there are also, it's important to keep in mind, there is also a number of those who are at the bottom, low and modest. So there is quite a lot of work to do when it comes to innovation procurement. Just as a matter of comparison, because the benchmark here last time was 2018, now we have 2022. You can see what was the progress made among the countries. So I think this is also for me, it's maybe the most interesting part of the analysis, to see what happened, how did the countries, whether they have grown in the number of PPIs, or they have been steady in terms of those kind of procurement. And you can see that there are some countries, for example, you've seen that Finland is here, one of the countries that was actually in the first place as the biggest innovation procurement procurer as a country. They're still holding the first place, but they also showed some growth in relation to the previous benchmarking study. But there are some countries which have really grew in numbers, and you can see it on the graph. One of them is Ireland, which is just, it's in a second place now, and it's just a little bit below Finland when it comes to the investments in innovation procurement. And then you can see also that countries such as Denmark and, for example, Estonia, which were also had quite, let's say, in comparison with other countries, also relatively high numbers, high results in the previous benchmarking study. But then we also have countries which were very low in the previous benchmarking study, and now they grew, which is, one of them is, you can see Croatia on the screen, and also there is Romania, even though they are quite still at quite low levels. But in general, there has been growth when it comes to the investment in innovation procurement. So I think this is the graph we will be looking at for now for some time and analyzing together with the data that is coming together with this. As you can see, again, most of the countries did good. There are some countries that have a lower level of innovation procurement that they had in 2018, but there are potentially different reasons for that. When it comes to the R&D, R&D procurement is still at, let's say, quite a low level. The average is around 0.55% of R&D procurement in all the countries. But the ones that are leading in R&D at the moment for 2022 are Latvia, Belgium, and United Kingdom. You can see that there is a significant difference among those countries in comparison with the rest. Okay, I mentioned earlier that we have different breakdowns when it comes to public procurement of innovation, and how did we analyze and how we actually prepare the country data sets which are about to be prepared also for the investment and for policy part. You can see that the numbers related to the PPIs are the biggest sector is general public services, public administration, economic and financial affairs, which is actually which takes almost 40%, so 39% of the overall PPIs. So then again, this is also the biggest in numbers when it comes to the number of public procurement entities. So it's also in that sense it correlates with this. It's very interesting that the biggest specific sectors that have a high level of actually PPIs are public transport, healthcare, and energy, which is also something that is, I would say, quite expected, especially looking back into the results of the previous study. Okay, then this is the breakdown of the PPI by the level of public activity within the classical sector. So you can see here that quite a lot of procurement is actually happening at the national level of the member state and local. So some of the countries have a very high level of activity at the local level, which is also quite interesting, such as, for example, Portugal, Poland, also Portugal, Hungary, and Finland, whereas some countries such as Ireland, Italy, Latvia, and Estonia have it more on the national level. Similar situation, not with all the countries, is also when it comes to utilities, but utilities are then again, it's quite different from a country to country. So you can see that on the left side, some of the countries have most of the PPIs happening in utility sector at the national level, and then some of the countries such as Finland or Spain, Slovakia are actually doing it more at the local level. Okay, we mentioned today that ICT subsector is quite important for the innovation procurement, and when analyzing both policy and investment a part of the project, this was probably the ICT was the sector which was mostly represented, and it has a quite high level of there is a quite high level of innovation within the ICT sector. We mentioned let's say the three subsectors, three definitions of the ICT, because there are also differences in the types of ICT we are procuring when it comes to innovation. And then when we are talking about those three, so content and media, ICT plus and core ICT. Most of them are related to core ICT, which are focused on the, let's say, the hardware and software public entities are buying. So it's 83% of the overall number. There were, again, since there were some questions related to published and unpublished, I think it would be quite interesting for you to see, because how much unpublished procurement is actually happening within the total public procurement of innovation, and also how much is it happening within the ICT sector. You can see it on the two slides, on these two graphs, that it's very similar when we're talking about the overall PPI. So the results show that basically 70% of the PPI are actually unpublished, whereas 30 are published. And then for the ICT, it's very similar. So 72% versus 28%. So there is much more innovation procurement and examples than we potentially are aware of and can find on our in our databases, our public procurement portals, TED portal, and so on. Okay, maybe before we move forward, I can just shortly answer the questions. I will stop sharing my screen and I will go to the questions. I know that there has been a lot of them. We will try to answer most of them, or at least. So just let me go back to the questions. So we had a question whether will any of the innovation procurement examples we looked at be included in the report or publicly available? Indeed, yes. Besides the innovation procurement, besides the country profiles we're preparing and the overall results and all these breakdowns that we are preparing, we will also prepare for each country one example of innovation procurement and the description of this innovation procurement in detail. So yes, there will be examples of innovation procurement. Slides, this is the one that we already answered. Yes, there was a question whether we evaluated tenders also below EU threshold, and if yes, how many out of the total you are showing. Indeed, we did evaluate tenders below the EU threshold. As mentioned, these tenders are actually majority of the tenders in terms of the volume. So indeed, they are part of the overall analysis. We're using all available tenders below the threshold and above the threshold for 2022 to prepare the final results. Yes, there were also questions regarding to the estimates and non-published contracts. As mentioned, these are only estimates. We did not use the unpublished I'd say examples to calculate, rather just an estimates to see how many of those are there. And then I will try to see what are there has been a lot of questions. Just a moment. Which one is this? Okay, after this. In light of the experience of this benchmarking round and the progress made since the last round, how far are we generally from the EU-wide monitoring system for innovation procurement? Okay, I think that's well, from our side, I think that this is definitely a beginning, because it is a pilot project. I think that's something to maybe to mention. But as Lieve Bos already mentioned, we will be, or this project will have a continuation. The benchmarking will have a continuation. So maybe Lieve, I don't know if you want to maybe add something on the question on how far we are from the EU-wide monitoring system for innovation procurement.
Yeah, true. I mean, we will continue the benchmarking. The call for tenders is out. It was just published a couple of days ago to continue the benchmarking for the next years, and then really do it on a yearly basis, not just every 4 years. And then we will also be able to see more over time how things are changing and make correlations between, okay, in these years, these improvements were done to policy frameworks. Is it impacting the investments or not? And in which sectors do we see still underinvestment? We already see some of these effects now. We'll come back to them, but yeah, then we will be able to follow this much more closely. And the intention is also to include it in the scoreboards that track research and innovation, and in other EU scoreboards to follow it up also sector per sector.
Thank you. There was also a question regarding correlation between the policy performance and outcomes in investment. I think, Lieve, you will be showing that slide with the graph which shows the correlation, so we can get back to that, and you will provide some input on that. And then we have, I'm trying to get to the question. There were many. I see that you're quite active, which is great. So there is an interest in this benchmarking study and the future benchmarking. So I really hope that this is also a basis for even better information and data for the future work. There is a question: won't there be always the countries at the bottom, with some countries performing above the EU average and others necessarily below? Okay, that this is these rankings are not very useful, and they may depend on the differences in data availability. We are trying to, especially when it comes to policy part, so maybe to distinguish these two. It is quite difficult sometimes also to get information because they're not always available. So we need to get to the right stakeholder to provide us with information, whether something is embedded into a certain, let's say, certain policy, or what are the plans there, and so on. However, when it comes to the data, I think that one of the roles and the key roles that in this process will have not only TED, which already has a good data set, and but also the project that is currently ongoing related to public procurement data space of the European Commission, which might actually also provide for a better quality of data, and also e-forms that are being implemented. So we're actually hoping that this, in the future, that the data sets will be even of the bigger quality, and that this won't influence these differences. Of course, as mentioned, this will be also part of the report we are preparing. There will be information about what is the data quality for each country, or what were the data fields that I showed a little bit before, whether they were available or not, and so on. So yes, this definitely can depend and has influence. Okay, then there are some comments more than questions. Okay, we have. Yeah, we have some answers. I see that Lily's been quite active in answering. Okay, I think that this is more or less it. No, we did not. We did not analyze innovation partnerships, but we did when we were discussing with national stakeholders. We did come across a lot of those examples as well. So this is also maybe something for some future. Let's say not necessarily benchmarking, but for future projects to think about. Yeah, exactly. And I see that Livy also answered for the R&D. I think that most of the questions are actually more or less answered. Not all of them are. Okay. And also a question on whether the previous benchmarking exercise used the AI. And yes, the previous benchmarking study used the AI, but it's a different type of AI. So again, as Anton described, we were building the AI from the scratch. So it's a, let's say, a different AI, and it's also from the previous benchmarking. It's been 4 years already, so technology is also changed. So that's something to keep in mind. And do you think in the near future, could you share the link for the tender? Sorry. Okay, that's for the tender that Levy mentioned. Do you think that in the near future you will be able to identify what type of procedure we use in this contract? But potentially yes, depending again on the data sets, original data sets, because some countries have this, some countries don't have, but I think that also eForms could help with this. And then we have a question about cross-border procurement. We don't have a specific breakdown related to the cross-border procurement, but because usually there is one contracting authority that is written in, let's say, in the data sets, and this is how we were looking at, and not necessarily looking into the cross-border procurement, which is also quite interesting in terms of innovation procurement. However, this was not part of our work. I don't know, Liv, if you want to add something. I've tried to scroll down through the questions, but I've seen that you also answered already for some of them.
I'm just posing the link to the standard in the chat that was asked.
Exactly, thank you.
For the rest, no, I think we answered all the questions, so we can continue.
Okay, perfect. Okay, then I leave a floor to my colleague Claudia, who will be presenting actually part related to integration to the scoreboards.
Yes, thank you, Yelena. If you can share the presentation, see it, so also other participants can see it. But yeah, so good afternoon. My name is Claudio Valle, and I'm part of the core team of PwC that has been working on this project in the past year and a half. And thank you for joining us today and for staying with us until now. We're almost at the end, but there is another interesting part I will go through now. So in this part, I will briefly describe the activity that was mentioned also by Lee before, that consists in including new indicators on innovation procurement into existing EU scoreboards. And as you know, this is the second benchmarking exercise. And of course, the results will be published in the final study report and in the country fact sheets as done in the previous time. However, in this second exercise, the Commission wanted to make a step forward and make the information more accessible and linked to other new EU initiatives and policies. So it was decided to take the data that are the output and the result of the investment benchmarking and further elaborate it in order to create innovation procurement indicators to be included into existing European scoreboards in order to provide valuable insights on the Europe state of play on innovation procurement and competitiveness, also through this additional, let's say, awareness, regional dissemination activity. So in this slide, we have outlined the steps that we follow to perform this activity, which is partially still ongoing, but is mostly completed. So the first step was to create a monitoring framework and identify a list of potential indicators that could be relevant, accepted, credible, robust. So we looked at the data that we had at our disposal, and we saw which type of information could be included in existing scoreboards. Which type of aggregations we had, and in general, which type of information could have been easy to understand, but also useful to have an idea what is the current innovation procurement context in Europe. And so after that, we, or in parallel to this, we were looking at existing scoreboards that exist in Europe, general one or also sectorial ones. And also based on the inputs from the Commission, we identified a number of scoreboards that could be targeted for embedding a new innovation procurement indicator. So we contacted the owners and we discussed how, in which section the new indicator could be included, which components of the innovation procurement could be represented. And then based on that, based on the agreement, we proceeded to prepare the data set and set up all the indicators, normally in the form of spreadsheets structured according to the format that is provided and indicated by the scoreboard owners. To allow them, according to their protocol and cutoff days, to include this information in the scoreboards. So what type of information we're going to include, we see it in the next slides, and it's something that is probably familiar to you. And so, yeah, so moving on, in the next slide, you can see that there are three main components of innovation procurement. I don't see the slides moving, but maybe it's only me. Okay. Yes, thanks. So, of course, there is an overall innovation procurement expenditure component. So the total innovation procurement per country, but then considering our the indicator that we target, the scoreboards that we targeted, and you will see in a minute, we also wanted to represent, of course, the ICT component of innovation procurement. That, as Yelena was mentioning before, includes the so-called core ICT, which is corresponds to IT and telecom hardware and software, the ICT content and media, and the ICT plus, so every ancillary IT and telecommunication purposes procurement, and the R&D procurement expenditure. So we selected according to specific CPV codes. We identified according to specific CPV codes which were the R&D procurements that correspond to different types of research and development activities, and we labeled them in order to obtain this subset of information. And then, of course, you can have ICT procurement that corresponds also to R&D and vice versa. So these dimensions can are not, let's say, exclusive. One can embed the other and vice versa. And so let's dive into the scoreboards that we identified in the next slide. You see, yeah. So as mentioned, the objective was to include European indicators on innovation procurement into the existing scoreboard. So we focus on three main scoreboards that are the DESI, the Digital Economy and Societal Index, which relatively recently has been integrated into the Digital Decade framework. The European Research Area scoreboard or monitoring exercise, and the EIS, the European Innovation Scoreboard. In the next slides, we can take a look at each of them to understand what was the rationale for including these, the innovation procurement indicator into each one of these. So starting from DESI in the next slide, we can see that basically DESI is a crucial component that is used to track and measure progress towards the digital target of the EU for 2030, and it provides a comprehensive assessment of performance across 4 dimensions of the Digital Decade Policy Program. What are these dimensions? These include skills and human capital, connectivity and infrastructure integration with digital technologies, and digital public services. So, and these dimensions are basically used to assess and compare the digital performance of EU countries and to ensure alignment with the goals of the digital decade. So, in this context, the innovation procurement indicator was considered relevant because it provides additional insights on aspects that are related normally to the digitalization of public services, for instance, description of the demand and supply of government solutions, or boosting the public services digitalization for businesses and citizens. So, given that the DESI has this type of angle for describing Europe's performance, we thought that, or it was agreed to include, or to try to include the indicator on innovation procurement. So in the next slide, you see how once available is going to be structured. So there will be an indicator focusing on the total amount of ICT-enabled solutions out of the total country public procurement expenditure. So you see on the right side, you have the little schema of the innovation procurement components, and highlighted the one that will be included in this scoreboard. So, of course, the basis for having this indicator is an absolute value in million euros. Normally, and this information will be provided, but the main indicator normally will be the percentage of ICT innovation procurement out of total public procurement expenditure as a starting point, and possibly also broken down across these 10 domains of public sector activity that you see listed below here. And so this is the first indicator that will be included under in the DESI and Digital Decade scoreboard. Moving to the next one, it's so the second scoreboard that we wanted to focus on, as mentioned before, is the European Innovation Scoreboard. So the EIS is basically an annual assessment that evaluates and compares the research and innovation performance across countries, and aims at identifying strengths and weaknesses of national innovation systems. And this is good because it provides countries and policymakers information on areas that could be improved to enhance their overall innovation performance in their country. So in this context, obviously the innovation procurement indicator can provide additional information on the type of finance and support aspects that are connected to innovation. For instance, currently in the EIS, there are indicators describing the R&D expenditure in universities and government research organizations, or also information on direct government funding and support for businesses, and in general, how countries are doing when it comes to progressing towards this 3% R&D target that has been set. So starting from this point, in the next slide, you see how what type of information will be included for innovation procurement. Of course, there will be information on the total amount of innovation procurement, but also, since there is this strong focus on R&D, there will be a sort of breakdown on R&D innovation procurement expenditure. So this will be also in terms of percentage of innovation procurement out of country GDP, also information, the starting information with the value in million of euros. And so, as I was mentioning before, there will be this split between, or this, let's say, breakdown between the R&D innovation procurement expenditure and everything that is not R&D, so generically called non-R&D innovation procurement expenditure. Okay, in the next slide, a small focus on the third and last of the scoreboards that we targeted as part of this exercise. is the ERA, European Research Area monitoring activity that is conducted annually. And so, yeah, the area is designed to monitor and report on the progress of the European Research Area's implementation and its performance. So there are specific targets, and this monitoring exercise focuses on this. And so, as you can see, also as part of this exercise, it was relevant to focus mostly on R&D investment. Why? Because there are multiple indicators under the ERA or the ERA sub-priorities that focus on R&D investment. For instance, gross domestic expenditure on R&D as percentage of the GDP, or coordination of R&I investments, which currently include also an indicator on government budget allocation for R&D at transnational level. And so in the next slide, you see how we intended to include an indicator on innovation procurement. So there will be an indicator focusing on R&D public procurement expenditure and total amount of R&D procurement. So it's related to R&D in percentage of country GDP, of course. This is, as I was mentioning before, ERA has some priority areas, and here you can see how, in particular, this indicator is also relevant for one of these, which is priority area 4, which is related to advancing concerted research and innovation investments and reforms. And which is, and in particular for Action 19, which is related to the establishment of an efficient and effective ERA monitoring system to reinforce evidence-informed policy making. So definitely adding an additional indicator on innovation procurement focused on R&D would contribute to this action and provide additional insights for private procurement and in general for policymakers. Moving to the next slide, which is the last one. So some closing consideration, of course, as I was mentioning before, this exercise corresponds to the second exercise of this kind, so it will represent a sort of baseline for future updates of the indicators. As Liv was mentioning before, this benchmarking will be repeated in the coming years. So at the moment, the indicators are not normalized and are included as is, but it might be that in the future could be normalized to adapt to socioeconomic changes. For the moment, the breakdowns will be those that are presented now, that have been presented now, but we don't exclude that maybe in the future also, depending on the data quality, additional breakdown could be included, for instance, for level of public sector activity or public sector domains. And as I was mentioning, these are the three main scoreboards that we focused on as part of this exercise. It's not excluded that maybe in the future additional scoreboards could be targeted, maybe domain-specific scoreboards. Some exist on health or energy, for example. This information normally should be available, the domain of public sector activity. So could be interesting also to discuss a possible inclusion of innovation procurement indicator also in those. I'm done with this part. I hope it was clear and interesting for everybody, and I will pass the floor and the microphone to Yelena, or if there is any question, please post them in the chat, and yeah, we will be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudio, for this presentation. You can maybe scroll down the chat in the meantime, but I think that most of the questions were actually answered and that we will be able to move on. I skipped the question that was mentioned in the break, actually, during the break. That was submitted by Romanian colleagues, if I'm not mistaken. Who are, if I understand correctly, actually providers or they're not public procurer, but they're economic operator. So just maybe from our side as the team working on the analysis of those kind of procurement procedures, definitely to make innovation happen. There must be a synergy between the public procurement entity and economic operators, and this is extremely important, especially when we're talking about innovation procurement. And I don't know if there are any additional questions. Claudia, have you maybe seen something additional in the chat that you might be? No?
We're scrolling down now.
I think not, but okay. Anyone else? If you have any question, you can add it.
I might simply say I see a reference to the LET report, much more than a market one, and how this work is going to be injected into the forthcoming review. We don't know, but just a remark from my side, it's good to see how you have all these initiatives from the Commission side converging into the same direction. If you have read the LET report, I've not read it all, but parts of it, and it focuses specifically on procurement and also on the strategic use of procurement, also for innovation purposes. So definitely this study, this benchmarking, and also potentially the inclusion of the indicators on procurement in innovation procurement in the existing scoreboards go in the direction that is set by that report, or supports the priorities and the indications that have been indicated by President Lett in his report. So yeah, we can expect also that progressing with this activity will provide further information and further insights for the review of this report, for the preparation of any other report on European competitiveness and potential for innovation, of course. Just a small consideration.
Great. Thank you very much for this, and also to all my colleagues for the presentations. And now for the last part, I will leave the floor again to Liv to provide us with conclusions and some follow-up information, and of course to close the event today. Thank you. But we cannot hear you. We can see the slides. I don't know.
Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yes,
Okay,
perfect.
great. Okay, I'll move this box down. So what have we learned today, basically? We see improvement between the benchmarking that was published in 2020 and the one that we have now in 2024. And what improvement do we see? In terms of policy frameworks, last time we saw that member states are using basically 1/4 of the policy measures that they could use to stimulate innovation procurement. So at that time, the efforts that were still needed were to multiply by 4 the efforts there to have 100% of the policy frameworks up and running everywhere. Now we see that member states are using 33% of the policy measures, so we still need a tripling of the effort there. In terms of ICT investments, last time we saw that 3.5% of all public procurement was spent in the non-defense field on ICT-based innovation procurement. Now we see that this has increased to 5.5%, but this still needs to double because we need to be around 12% on ICT-based innovation procurements to fully use the potential of ICT to modernize public services. In terms of R&D procurements, last time we saw that the amount of R&D procurement was 0.36% of all public procurement, and now this has increased to 0.5%, but it still needs to be multiplied by 4 at least to have enough R&D procurement to get new solutions developed for the public sector. In terms of adoption of innovative solutions, last time we saw that there was 9.6% of all public procurement spent on procurement of innovative solutions. And now we see that this has increased to almost 11%, 10.95%. But it still needs to almost double, a bit less than double. It needs to multiply by 1.7 to arrive at the 20%, like the US and other parts of the world are doing to make Europe equally competitive, let's say, as other parts of the world. So we see clearly improvement, but we still have quite a way to go. So I would say continue the efforts. Why? Let's see this on the next slide. Because when you continue the efforts on increasing the policy frameworks, it has an effect on the investments also. Look at the graph here, where we see the comprehensiveness of the policy frameworks on the vertical axis, and then the amount of innovation procurement that this results in. And we see clearly that countries that have a much more developed policy framework also are leading in the amount of investments that are happening in their country. And countries that are lagging on the policy framework have also less procurers that dare to undertake an innovation procurement. So here the message is clearly keep on working on all aspects, if you're a policymaker, of your policy frameworks, because it clearly has an impact on investments. Then how do we see the evolution over time compared to the last benchmarking? You see here 3 groups of countries, the ones on the left and the ones on the middle. Those are 25 countries in total. There is a direct correlation between what happened with their policy frameworks last time, between last time and now, and what happens with the investments. So the big group of countries in the middle, they improved compared to last time their policy framework. Their score went up. They have more measures that are promoting and supporting innovation procurement. And you see that also the investments in those countries in innovation procurement went up. The 5 countries on the left had a little decrease in their policy framework. They stopped some measures or decreased the intensity of them. And you see that also the investments in innovation procurement went down in those countries. And the 5 countries on the right, there is sort of an unclear situation where the policy framework either went up a bit or went down a bit, and the investments remained the same or didn't change very much, or in correlation with what happened with the policy framework. Maybe also there is an effect here that some of the policy measures are not fully reflected yet in the investments, because some things take time for public procurers to really take up and implement. But overall, if 25 out of 30 countries clearly see a direct link between what happens in the policy frameworks and what happens in the investments, it means that we really need to improve the policy frameworks because it affects directly the investments. Then about the link between innovation procurement and economic growth. So here you see on a graph all the innovation procurement investments that we saw in 2022 as percentage of total procurement, plotted there for all the countries. And on the vertical axis, you see the GDP. So the gross domestic product per person, per capita in the same countries for the same year. And you clearly see also that there is a positive correlation. Like we said in the beginning of today, countries that use innovation procurement to modernize their public services, to make them more efficient, higher quality. This can have an impact on the economy, because then people and businesses can also become more efficient and benefit from this higher quality public services to do their own work more efficiently. And the money that is saved by the public sector by deploying, for example, cheaper innovative solutions can be reinvested in other parts of the economy to make that grow again. The countries there that are outliers that are flying around there at the top, these are countries like Luxembourg or Ireland, small countries that have a very high GDP compared to other countries that are not the usual European countries, let's say, in terms of GDP. But if you look at all the others, they are clearly around this line, around this graph, which shows upward trend between innovation procurement and economic growth. So also there, yeah, please consider this. Innovation procurements are important for economic growth, so use them also to create this type of impact. Choose the cases well where you do innovation procurement, basically where they can have great impact. And in that respect, it's clear from the data that we saw this year, while looking at the 2022 investments, that a significantly higher amount of innovation procurements than last time we could find for in the digital sector and in the green sector. And that's no surprise because Europe is in the green digital transition. Lots of investments are being directed to make public services also greener and more digitized. So ICT-based innovation procurements last time were only 40% of all innovation procurements, and now there is 50% of all innovation procurements that are investing in ICT-based innovation. So that's a significant increase. And also for the green transition, there is a significant increase in the amount of green procurements. That doesn't mean that there are no innovation procurements in other domains. Like you saw in the breakdowns, there are still huge amount of procurements in other domains, but green and digital transition happen in every domain, right? Both in healthcare, transport, and so on. So they have an impact everywhere. They are this kind of cross-sectorial transitions. And they have definitely contributed to the increase of innovation procurements and will have also an impact on economic growth, because ICT is an accelerator for economic growth. ICT makes everything more efficient and faster and so on. And the greener we are, the more advanced we will be in this area worldwide, and also the more economic growth we will have in that field. So that's positive, but still much more innovation procurement needs to be done in the future to create even more economic growth, because we're not out of the difficult situation yet today. What else can I say? Here is the link where you will be able to find all the benchmarking results, both those of the previous benchmarking and of the current benchmarking. If you're interested in other initiatives that we're doing on innovation procurement, have a look at our website that lists all the initiatives. Apply for the European Innovation Procurement Awards. It's not just a nice recognition that you will receive, a handshake from a commissioner, for example, but it's also a monetary prize that is attached to the European Innovation Procurement Awards, 75,000 euros per prize. So you don't do the work for nothing if you write an application, let's say. There is also funding for innovation procurements on our website, so have a look. There are currently calls open in healthcare and security. Greening healthcare, by the way, and security can be on any aspect of security, so have a look. Want to remain updated on innovation procurement initiatives that we're launching, policy initiatives, funding, events, etc. Then subscribe to our newsletter. That was it for me for conclusions, so I will give back the floor to Jelena, and we can check if there are any questions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I see some clappings and some really nice messages to us. Thank you so much. Thank you also, Lee, for supporting us during this process. It's been quite a long work. It passed really quickly. We're looking forward to sharing the results also in written form with you. We will share this materials from today's workshop together with the recording, so you can have a look at it if you wish, or share it with your colleagues. So I'm checking. Thank you all again. I see that additional comments are coming. Thank you once again. We actually managed to finish a little bit ahead of the time. So we're giving you additional 25 minutes for today. Thank you for being with us. We're hoping that if you're public procurers, that this will be also a way to stimulate and to encourage you to actually buy innovation procurement if you are a policymaker, to actually consider involving more innovation procurement in different policies and across different sectors. This is a very important topic, and it's actually something that boosts development of all of us and across all the countries. Thank you very much for being with us today from early morning at 10. And we will keep you actually posted with all the information about workshops and with the follow-up materials. So have a nice rest of the day. Thank you, Oli. Thank you for also to my colleagues who are presenting today, and see you some other time, hopefully with improvements in innovation procurement. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.